Well, here we are back again, and I have to say that this next reading of the next two chapters, I was coerced into doing it by, shall I say, popular demand, and I had no choice but to acquiesce because the requirements, the requests were made in such a brutally seductive way that yes, Zola, I'm going to do it. Yes, Zola, I'm going to do it.
And they'll just have to figure out the conclusion by buying the book.
Well, I'll have great lemonade to that.
All right. How the Curse is Lifted will have to be read by those who buy the book.
Okay, well, chapter 10 and 11 take us right into the middle of a book that is 22 chapters, so it's all well and good.
Okay.
Well, let's have at it.
Let's have at it.
This is chapter 10, and it's where people begin to come together for the reunion that they're going to have. Chester looked down on the neatly checkered pattern of houses and lawns surrounding O'Hare Field as the plane circled the land. Chicago, my hometown. He felt at ease in Chicago. It never seemed to change very much. He could call it home in a way that he couldn't call a small town in Mississippi where he was born home, or Alicante, Spain, or a number of other places he'd lived in throughout the world. Chicago was where he first became aware of the blues, of the fact that sin and a good life could be parallel numbers. Chicago was every emotion he could or would ever have. He felt that. Chicago in the passionate summertime was where he had shot and killed one of the great loves of his life. The gorgeous creature that the hood had nicknamed Heatwave. Chicago, Statesville, Penitentiary, Joliet, Illinois, is where he had spent 15 years of his life for a crime of passion. Please fasten your seatbelt, Mr. Simmons. We're coming in for the landing. Mr. Simmons, the celebrity or the author, the recognized one, not Chester or Buddha, but Mr. Simmons. I left here as a nothing and now I'm returning as Mr. Simmons. Odei was a hit. There were praises for the book from people who hadn't even read it. From Los Angeles, the one who spent the night with me, sister's name. Anyway. On to Dallas, a wild time in New Orleans, complete with gumbo filet. Birmingham, no one can appreciate history more than we can. We are real South. A hot minute in Atlanta before the Quartet reunion in Chicago. He felt a little pushed but exhilarated. Yeah, it's all coming together now. He had communicated with the Quinns in Chicago. Chester L. Simmons, it would be an honor to have you come to our reunion. The Johnsons in LA spoke to us about you last week. I'm trying to get a chance to read your book as soon as I can pry it out of my wife's hands. And Mr. and Mrs. Francine Quarles in Augusta, Georgia. We feel like we know you already. It'll be a pleasure to meet you. The Quartet reunion was firming into something that none of them had foreseen. Alan Rich was responsible for a share of it. Well, Chester, it was simply a matter of facing reality. Is either we make an effort to manipulate the media attention or it's going to manipulate us. I'm sorry to have to put it that way, but that's the way life is. There's no way you could possibly be involved in something like this without attracting a lot of attention. Chester was a bit reserved about the situation for a few minutes, but the families were not distressed unduly. And that was the important thing, so far as he was concerned. No problem. It might act to spur a lot of more African Americans into checking themselves out. The last time we had a big push in that direction was when Alex Haley came out with Roots. The plane was gliding in for a landing. He could feel that familiar rush through his system that didn't stop until the craft slowed to a walk. Fantastic. The modern thing. Here I can jump up from Atlanta in the middle of a PR thing for a couple of days, then jump back down into it as though nothing had ever happened. Oh, Chester, mind if we go through this for a sec? I've kept stuff down to a bare minimum because I know you want to focus on the reunion and everything. So we only got 2 TV interviews. One this evening, the other one at 10 a.m. tomorrow. A couple of radio bits, and if I'm not mistaken, you'll be hounded a bit by the newspaper people. Not a lot of stuff. Chester smiled sarcastically in Alan Richards' direction. Gotta give it to you, guy. You're always on the job. The reporters meeting him in the airport were surprised. They were polite but persistent. Mr. Simmons, can you tell us if the reunion of the Quartet Descendants is a part of your publicity scheme to advertise? No, it is not. My attendance at this reunion is by invitation, personal and private. The reporters looked skeptical, made cynical notes. But you could say that the timing is right, couldn't you? I didn't tell them when they should have their reunion. If you had to say something about the reunion, that statement would have to come from a family member. Can you give us some idea of the family's reaction to your book? Favorable. Mr. Simmons, can you give us a reaction to the statement made by Miss Sylvia Banks of Pasadena, California, that you're the father of her coming baby? Chester knitted his brows with an honest frown. Sylvia Banks. Oh, yes, yes. The gorgeous young sister in the hotel. Well, I'll be damned. So she going for a paternity suit? This early in the game? It'll be interesting to see how she can prove that I got her pregnant while using a world-class condom. Got to be more careful in the future. My reaction to the statement is no reaction. I have no idea who Sylvia Banks of Pasadena, California is. Alan Rich jumped into the breach. Ladies and gentlemen, please excuse us. Mr. Simmons is late for a television interview. Thank you for your interest. We'll be issuing more information on Mr. Simmons' activities this evening. Thank you. The now familiar limo. Alan Rich deserved a bonus. Chester made a mental note to mail a well-done note back to Alan Rich's firm after the tour was over. Chicago again. He stared out of the tinted windows at the grimy expressways. The summer green dress was on, but he could still see the damage the winter had done. I couldn't live in a cold zone again. How's that? Yeah, sorry, Alan, just mumbling to myself. They took a familiar route, the expressway that tunneled under the giant post office onto the outer drive. A right turn south heading for the Hyde Parker. Beautiful. If a stranger came to this place and was prevented from wandering inland for more than a few blocks, he thinks it's one of the most wonderful cities of the world. Yeah. Just stay along the downtown lakeshore line and focus on the Art Institute, the grand museums, and the spectacular lakefront views. Don't make the mistake of wandering inland into neighborhoods where a shot of dope could buy a murder, or a face the wrong color could be smashed to pieces. Incredible place. The driver made a smooth turn off of the expressway into the University of Chicago dominated area called Hyde Park. Dear old Hyde Park, the 60s, the last groan of bohemianism, or had it been a moan. Alan, where are you from? Let me see. I was born in New York, but my mom wanted me to know the old country, so she took me and my sister to Russia when I was 5. We lived there till I was 12. After that, we moved to Paris for a few years, then London, Madrid, Rome, Amsterdam, and down into South Africa for a couple of years. South Africa? Yeah. You know how Jews are. We got relatives everywhere. Your mother still living? Yeah, she died in 1995. What about your dad? Pop worked himself to death trying to make all the money Mom needed to spend for the rest of her life. Chester stared at the PR man, seeing a different person. You never mentioned any of this to me. You never asked? The Hyde Parker Hotel, 85 years old, classy. Chester strutted in. Remember when people of color were only allowed in the establishment to do the menial labor? Ah, yes, Mr. Simmons, welcome to the Hyde Parker. Suite 400 has been reserved for you. Also, sir, I have here a schedule of the activities that have been planned by the reunion committee. Chester and Allen exchanged coded eye signals. Looks like professionals at work here. Mr. Rich, you are in 312. We will have the bellhop bring your luggage up. We will do everything possible to help you enjoy your stay at the Hyde Parker. My name is Maurice. The bellhops pushed a cart full of bags into an old-fashioned European lift, complete with stained glass. Allen whispered, "This place reminds me of something out of an old Agatha Christie novel." "Third floor, sir." Chester, don't forget 6 p.m. TV time. I'll come for you at 5, okay? It's 2 now. On the dot, pal, on the dot. Chester tipped the bellhop and collapsed on the Chanel spreaded 4-poster. Now then, let's see what we got here. The Quartet family reunion schedule. No need to pay any attention to July 4th. They've already done that. 12 noon, lunch in the Hyde Parker dining room. Vegetarian lunch is available. Suggested topic, open. 4 o'clock, family business in the hospitality suite. Mr. Quinn remarks. 9 o'clock, this session will only be open to family members and specifically invited guests. Party, refreshments afterwards, July 6th. We will discuss some of the suggestions made earlier and try to determine the best ways and means to act on them. 12 noon, lunch catered picnic on the beach. 4 p.m., family business in a hospitality suite. Mr. Chester Simmons, author of Odei, remarks. July 7th, open day. This schedule has been deliberately left open, loose in a sense, to prevent hardening of any creative arteries. We feel that the energy we put into this first meeting will determine the future direction of our family. Welcome to the first reunion of the Quartets. If there are any questions or problems that need to be addressed, please contact Mrs. Irma Sims in room 110. Y'all be damned. Simple as baby shit, no long drawn-out jive about this and that. Somebody's saying, hey, let's get together in a groovy setting and see what can come out of it. The phone ringing pulled him away from his admiration of the tersely worded reunion schedule. Mr. Simmons, this is Robert Quinn. We'd like to have you join us in the hospitality suite if it doesn't inconvenience you. I'll be there in 15 minutes. Fine, we'll be looking forward to meeting you. A quick shower and a change into something casual and elegant. Off to the hospitality suite, 5th floor, penthouse. He was drawn to the open door by the sound of John Coltrane's Love Supreme. Yeah, that'll work. 4 people rushed to greet him as he entered the large but cozy suite. The space was filled with colorful collection of African Americans. Hello, I'm Robert Quinn, and this is my wife, Dinah. Glad you could make it. Chester was drawn to the warmth of the couple. Chester, how are you? Good to see you. Dr. Mary Quist Johnson, feeling good and looking good. Hi, Mary, good to see you again. And Frank, how's it going, brother? Just great, just great. This whole experience is, wow, I don't know how to describe it. Robert Quinn cut into Frank Johnson's ebullient overflow. Sisters and brothers, ladies and gentlemen, may I please have your attention for a moment? Thank you. We're pleased to announce that Chester Simmons has joined us. We'd like to welcome him properly. Would you please form a line to my right? Chester felt a slight tinge of discomfort about being singled out, but it soon slipped away as a double scotch was placed in his hand, and he realized the party atmosphere was not adversely affected by this introduction ceremony. We did this with everybody. First day, Robert Quinn whispered into his ear. Frank and Mary's sons, Kojo and Kwame. Good to see you guys again. And the daughter he hadn't met when he had dinner with them at their home in California. Chester, this is Tawula. Glad to meet you, finally. Missed you the evening I had dinner at your home. She gave him a strange look. What a beautiful girl. She looks so pure, innocent. Well, am I going to be introduced to the great man, or are you just going to stand around talking about me behind my back? Well, Kofi and Kwame automatically moved to either side of their sister, prepared to cart her away if she lost complete control of herself. Chester diffused the situation. Aha! Someone who really wants to meet a black writer. Thank you, I'm Chester L. Simmons, and you are... He leaned in close to Bella Quinn's flaring nostrils and twitching eyes. She was angry about something. It was an anger without focus, and he couldn't tell if his charming manner and pleasant smile was chilling her out. Me, who am I? Don't you know? I'll tell you since you asked me. I'm Bella, and these are my two unholy terrors. My brother Kofi on this side and Kwame on this side. Chester carefully observed the actions of a very hip collection of people. They were obviously not going to allow one schizoid person's inappropriate behavior to disturb them. They had already met and defined the place where she was. Bella's hysterical laughter stopped abruptly, and she became suddenly solemn. Chester flowed with the tide, on with the next couple. Hello there, I'm Chester Simmons. How are you? I'm Jesse Quarles, and this is my wife, Francine. We're from Augusta, Georgia. Pleased to meet you. Augusta's always been one of my favorite cities. And these are our twin daughters, Taiwo and Kahindi, and over here on the sofa is our son, Benjamin. Chester strolled toward the keen-eyed boy with the huge head and seal flippers for hands and feet. What a strange-looking creature. If it weren't for the look in his eyes, he would be a monster. Hello, Benjamin. Hi, Mr. Simmons. I've read all your books. Next to Langston Hughes, you're my favorite writer. Chester felt the sudden hot sting of tears well up in his eyes. He's putting me on the same shelf with Langston Hughes. I am blessed today. I'm truly honored to hear you say that. I really am. We'll be talking more, okay? Okay. The line that had formed to Robert Quinn's right had fragmented into splintered groups. The Quinns, Quarles, and Johnsons were the originals, or more specifically, Robert Quinn was an original quartet. Francine Quarles and Mary Quist were originals. The others were children of the originals, friends of the friends, involved folks. He made a quick scan count of about 30, 40 people in the room. They covered the color spectrum from light charcoal to pale ivory. They were quick-witted, fast-moving, and proud. He could see it at a glance. After his introduction, he was given the same freedom of movement that everyone else enjoyed, almost. Robert Quinn latched onto his elbow and steered him to a far corner. Well, Mr. Simmons, please call me Chester. Well, Chester, what do you think? Can I speak frankly? Please do, please. You've got a hell of a bunch of good people in this room, a hell of a bunch. Your good vibes that they're throwing out make me feel blessed to be here. Robert Quinn literally beamed with good feelings to hear Chester's comments. He shook his hand. Thank you for saying that. Thank you. I mean it. He pumped his hand again, energetically, warmly, and strolled away with his chest puffed out, leaving Chester to meander about the room, sipping a fresh double scotch. It was a beautiful group of compatible people. They sipped. They chatted about relevant stuff. They were there for a purpose. Mr. Simmons, I want to talk to you privately. Can we step into the hall? Chester looked down into the silky pools of Tabula's seductive eyes and almost followed her out of the room. Why can't we talk right here, Tabula? Are you afraid of me or something? Why should I be afraid of you? He caught peripheral frowns on the faces of the Johnsons. I know. Do you know? Chester felt uncomfortable playing grown-up games with a teenage girl, but he didn't want to have to give her the satisfaction of holding the upper hand. Tabula, let's stop the cat and mouse bullshit. What's the problem? He felt drawn to her as she lowered her head and started to cry without a change of expression. I don't know what the problem is. That's a problem. Do you understand? He wanted to take her in his arms and comfort her, but he knew it wouldn't be the right thing to do. She might misunderstand. Her parents might misinterpret. I think I do understand Tabula. Alan Rich's appearance in the room was almost disconcerting. Oh, Chester, sorry to rush you, but it's time for the show. I'll be with you in a second. Let me say a couple of words to this guy over here. Tabula held his hand in a moist, clammy handshake as he pulled away to Robert Quinn. Bob, I have an appointment to keep. Think you can make it back by 9? Possibly. What's up? It involves family business. He spoke mysteriously. I'll be back. Chester waved cordially to all the people he could remember being introduced to and eased out, a half-dozen things swirling around in his head. You know something, Alan? I'm glad I wrote my book before I met these people. Alan Rich punched the down button in the Agatha Christie lip and gave Chester a puzzled look. Chapter 11. Chapter 11. For literary types, had been assembled to question Chester Simmons about his latest book, Odei. He settled into the interviewee's chair, feeling a hostile vibe from each of the four. And now our panel. To my left, Mr. Stark Phillips. Chester muffled a smile. Any black man who would go through life named Stark has got to have an identity problem. Stark glanced at Chester and smiled into the camera. Obviously, he has his own agenda. Also to my left, Ms. Ola Fulana. On my right, Ms. Keiko Jones. I am Mark Epstein, and I will more or less moderate the program as we probe the murky depths of black literature. Why do you say murky depths? You make it sound as though we're about to go mud wrestling or something. Chester decided to come out swinging. He had learned his lesson well from previous media battles. If he gave them an inch, they'd take his image and run wherever they wanted to with it. Thank you for that comment, Mr. Simmons. Now then, who would like to kick this off by addressing themselves to Mr. Simmons' question? You made the statement, Mr. Epstein. I'd like you to address yourself to the answer. Chester leaned forward and dished a nasty little smile out at Mr. Epstein. Well, let me say this. If I were a Jewish writer, would you start off talking about the murky depths of Jewish literature? Or the murky depths of Russian-American literature? Or is murky reserved for discussions about African-American works of art? Alan Rich gave him a 2 thumbs up salute. You pose an interesting question there, Mr. Simmons. Perhaps our panel would like to involve themselves in this semantical playthrough. Chester settled back, confident he had started them off on the right foot. We won't be having any of the usual bullshit slip through here because I won't stand for it. Keiko Jones? Epstein was evading the question put to him, deflecting it with a slippery smile. Chester studied Keiko Jones carefully, a very Asian-looking African-American woman. I'd like to say first off that I'm not quite comfortable with the very idea of all this ethnicity stuff. I mean, let's face it. What does any of that kind of thinking have to do with multi-ethnic people such as myself? In today's world, we're saturated with the idea that everything has to be black or white. Everything is not simply black or white. There are grays and yellows and other colors too. Chester stared at the charming young woman. This is definitely going to be the nutcake hour. I can feel it in my bones. Mark, I just gotta agree with Keiko. The sooner we abolish certain kinds of labels, the Afrocentric label, for example, the better off we'll be. Why are you so anxious to throw your heritage away, brother? We're the only cultural group in this country asked to do something that idiotic. Chester spoke with a silky hardness in his voice. He realized he was surrounded by the kind of people who were chosen because they could be counted on to say all of the wrong things for somebody else's reasons. No need to be polite and charming with them. It was Olaf Alana's turn. Chester held out some hope, looking at her kente cloth, but realized he was up against another kind of wall, midway into her second sentence. I have no problems with the Afrocentricity of Mr. Simmons' novel. My problem is with his use of the language and the position he places the black woman in. That's what I have problems with. Chester had to caution himself not to frown or to become too sarcastic. What the hell are these people talking about? They have their personal little piles of shit to attend, but they want to use me as a vehicle to get there. Let's see how this works out. Mr. Simmons, how would you like to respond to Miss Fulana's statement? Fuck all you assholes. Well, what can I say? I can't do anything about her finding the language in the book not to her taste, and I certainly didn't write the book with Sister Fulana's mindset in mind. I've offered the perceptive reader several layers of different languages, all in English, to be concerned with. Anybody can get hung up on whatever they choose to be hung up on. But you fail to deal with the position you've placed black women in your book. Chester was on the verge of feeling sorry for Olaf Alana, Stark, Phillips, Keiko Jones, and Mark Epstein. He had the feeling they had been scraped from some wild academic wall and flung into the television studio without the slightest notion of what a true dialogue was supposed to be about. A conversation to them obviously meant an argument, a confrontation. Well, you got hold of the right boy this evening. Look, my sister. He enjoyed her squirming away from an Afrocentric greeting in front of a multicultural audience. I don't know where you've imagined a black woman to be in my work, but I can assure you that a serious reading will reveal my efforts to elevate her to the highest levels, spiritually, emotionally, and any other kind of way you can think of. He decided to cut them off at the pass, not to allow one bandit remark to slip through once he realized they were victims of confusion fueled by excessive ego. We'll take a little break to allow our other stations to join us and come right back to today's focus on new authors. Mr. Chester L. Simmons, author of Odei. Chester noticed that they exchanged comments with each other and made doodling commentaries on the paper in front of them, but no one looked in his direction during the brief non-commercial break. What a bunch of fart brains. The makeup woman, a small, tightly muscled blonde with china blue eyes, expertly brushed his face with a powder puff as she whispered, "Give the idiots hell, Mr. Simmons. Give them hell." Welcome back to New Authors. Our guest this evening is the provocative and stimulating Mr. Chester L. Simmons, author of Odei, an adventurous tale of intrigue, mystery. Not true, Mr. Epstein, not true, Chester interrupted. It's simply a historical novel that has a sound foundation in facts. And of facts. Mark Epstein stared at Chester for a full beat, battered out of his groove. Yes, of course. Stark, you wanted to make a comment? Stark, bark. Yeah, Mark. I want to talk for a moment about Mr. Simmons' level of protest in his work. As you know, the black protest novel as a genre has been just almost lost control of himself and started to say something extremely mean-spirited to Stark Phillips. He decided to restrain himself and ask a polite question instead. Brother, what the hell are you talking about? He didn't really enjoy watching Stark Phillips's nut brown complexion slip to a brownish red, but it was unavoidable. They wanted to sit in front of the cameras and play Yang the author, and he wasn't in the mood for it. Mark Epstein jumped to the top of the rampart as Stark scribbled furious on a sheet of paper in front of him. What I think Stark is trying to suggest is that Odei, as a work in the black protest genre, it is not a work in the black protest genre, period. The whole scene went black for a few dull moments. No one could think of anything to throw at Chester Simmons. He decided to stay on the offensive. I swear, I don't know how long it's going to take, but I sincerely wish that some people would stop assuming that African American writers only write in the protest genre. I think we would all benefit from a generous lack of stereotyping that seemed to be prevalent in some so-called intellectual circles. They hadn't expected him to jump out of the box the way he was doing it. He could tell from the evasive expression that flitted across their faces. Keiko Jones, the African-looking Asian woman, straightened up in her seat. I can appreciate what you're saying, Mr. Simmons. As a multicultural, biracial person, I'm the victim of stereotyping every day. I mean, you know, people judge me by my looks alone, and Mr. Jones, yes? Why don't you save your personal identity problems for another show? They were in a psychological updraft. He could feel it and didn't give a damn. Oh, I don't have an identity problem, not at all. My dad was mixed with Indian, French, Spanish, and African, and my mom was Japanese, which makes me multicultural, biracial. If you want to believe that, it's your personal business. However, I'd like to suggest you take a hard look at yourself in an old-fashioned American mirror after this show is over. Mark Epstein's forehead was beaded with a fine grain of perspiration, and his eyes were listing. Mr. Simmons, may I interject something? By all means, please interject. From all that's been said here thus far, Odei seems to be the kind of book that offers us an agenda, / menu, filled with an enormous number of angles to look at. Chester low profiles his sarcasm for the greatest possible impact. I'm inclined to agree with you. Odei does offer an enormous number of angles to look at. He left the other shoe dangling in midair. It didn't require the finishing touch, which would have been if one of you poop butts had decided to read the damn thing. Once again, my name is Mark Epstein, and we've just concluded an interview with the controversial author, Chester Simmons. Sorry, Mr. Epstein, I wasn't controversial until I arrived here this evening. Mark Epstein rolled his eyes in Chester's direction, a hard, hostile glare in him. Thank you for being our guest, Mr. Simmons, here on New Authors. It was definitely my pleasure. The studio lights were dimmed, and the obligatory behind-the-scenes handshakes were done as quickly as possible. Mr. Simmons, you know, you're not the easiest guy in the world to interview, you know. That's not true, Mr. Epstein. It's just that I don't participate in bullshit.
Okay.
Got that? Stark Phillips and Keiko Jones flashed intimidating smiles in his direction and skipped out of a side exit. Olafulana lingered near Mark Epstein's shoulder for a few moments before she cut in. You know something, Mr. Simmons? I think we would have had a much more successful interview with you if we had focused on your book. He blindsided her with a quick hug and a kiss on the left cheek. Mark Epstein tippy-toed away. Circumstances forced me to agree with you. Maybe next time. Alan Rich strolled through the television studio corridor beside him, looking vaguely puzzled. Chester, tell me, what the hell is that all about? Who knows, Alan? There are times when people are simply out of sync. I think in this case they came for one purpose, and I wasn't there for that. Chester shocked him. Alan shocked him by bursting into loud laughter and wringing his right hand. Shit, you kicked ass and took names. They popped into the elevator. Alan Rich, still gripped by his personal contagion of humor, Chester shared the vibe with a smile. How would you compare this one with the one in Birmingham? Alan's laughter faded like a shadow. Nah, whoa, that was heavy. I mean, heavy. Good evening, folks. Our regular moderator is out sick this week. We all know how we have this flu thing going around. Jonathan Swinlow is going to be substituting for Steve Earhart. After the half hour was over and the cameras stopped rolling, Chester and Swinlow had to be restrained from having an old-fashioned down and dirty fish fight. The catalyst for the activity was not complex. Swinlow was of the opinion that blacks should put the kind of thing you're writing about behind them. It's something that happened. So now let's get on with it. Why do you insist on beating a dead horse? Chester disagreed passionately. Once again, we have a white man telling us to forget what they did to us. I think we've shown superhuman decency to soft pedal this horrible history. We shouldn't be asked to forget it too. That's a bit much. Do you think Hitler, if he were alive today, could persuade the Jews, the Gypsies, the Ukrainians, the Poles, the physically challenged, the mentally retarded to forget what he did to them? I don't think so. I don't think so. And it had gone downhill from there, all the way downhill, all the way to the physical. They stepped from the elevator, still up from the recent happening. We've got the Chicago Current Events show tomorrow morning. That right? Yeah, your current event, and if my nose for scandal is working correctly, you're going to have a hot morning no matter what the temperature is. It's called a call-in thing, lots of action. Yeah, okay, whatever. You want to do a little pub crawling? Love to, Alan, but I got a family meeting to attend this evening, remember? Oh, yeah, I forgot. They settled into the soft atmosphere of the chauffeur-driven limo, each lost in his private thoughts. The Johnsons, the Quinns, and the Quarles welcomed him in a smaller, more intimate room, left of the hospitality suite. Robert Quinn pulled him into the circle with a firm handshake. We saw your program this evening, Chester. It was to go. It was great to see Mark Epstein get his lump for a change. They usually have people on his show who are so desperate to be there, they'll take anything he dishes out. And those clowns who are supposed to be interviewing you, ugh. They bubbled around, sipping wine and fine liquors. He felt at ease, grateful to be back in the family groove, even if it wasn't his own. Can we bring it down, please? Thank you. Chester, we have 3 specific reasons for our meeting here this evening. They all watched Robert Quinn do a dramatic pause. Number 1, we thought it would be interesting to share a reading of the last chapter of Odei, your excellent book about us. I think we're all in agreement that it is indeed a very fine work. They greeted Robert Quinn's compliment with serious applause. Number 2, we would like to share some data with you that you, as a writer-historian, will certainly find of some interest. And finally, and most importantly, we would like to commission you to do a bit of detective work for us. We'll get into the details after our reading. Now then, can we offer you some refreshment? They seated him in a comfortable chair within the loosely arranged circle, placed trays of finger food within easy reach, and took his order for a double scotch on the rocks. He panned the group. Everyone was there, including Bella Quinn, who looked a bit sleepy. He guessed she'd been sedated. Tabula, the nymph, surreptitiously studied the crotches of the men in the room, including his. Chester almost choked on his drink to see each of the adults pull out a copy of Odei. Robert Quinn made a broad wink. My wonderful secretary, Mrs. Simmons, thought this would be a good idea. When I see her again, I'll have to ask her to add a few more letters to her name so that she can be called Mrs. Simmons. Mm-hmm. They enjoyed his little joke and settled back to listen to a reading of the last chapter of his book. I'll only read the first page of chapter 12. This is the book within the book called Odei. Kofi Bookman sank to his knees and kissed the earth of his native land. He felt the weight of many emotions fall away and the urge to cry. The men who had rowed him ashore from the big canoe with wings looked at him with curious eyes. They were silent, patiently waiting for him to finish praying to his ancestors for the gift of being able to return to his native village after so many years. Finally, he stood, remembering they were there and gave each of them 2 gold coins in payment for bringing him ashore. They took their payment and rowed back to the ship. Kofi pulled his 2 fully loaded carpet bags into the shade of a palm tree and sat there, sifting sand through his work-calloused fingers, remembering so many years ago, Grandfather would be pleased with this catch, the fish that we will call those that please the tongue.
Wow.
He felt the morning coming alive. On the beach, the bits and pieces of what seemed like a long-ago dream began to reassemble. The fish and meeting his friend Kwame on the way home. And I'm going to stop it there.
Wow.
Okay.
Woo!
And there we have it.
There we have it.
Shackles Across Time.
Shackles Across Time, which is written by Odei Hawkins and can be purchased through Barnes & Noble, Amazon, or Author House. And your website is www.odeihawkins.com. And of course, it would be who people who want to find out how the curse is lifted to purchase the book.
Great. For those who are attracted to symbolic art, I'd like to suggest that you pay close attention to Salena-Hawkins' cover, Shackles Across Time. Let me say this before it comes to an end for this time. When I went to Ghana, I didn't go in search of my roots or anything. I felt that Alex Hayden, who was a person I got to know briefly while writing a television show, but I was struck by the fact that so little African American history was known by so many Africans. I think it may be kind of an unfair equation that I'm making, but it seems that most of the African Americans I met, and that I have met over time, who go to Africa know quite a little bit about it. It's like doing your homework to go to someplace. But then on the other hand, I discovered that there were many Africans, I'm not going to say all, but many Africans have very little knowledge of African American history. I gave a talk at the University of Legon, or the University of Ghana, to maybe 500 or 600 people, and at one point in the discussion, I asked them how many of them could remember or think back to relatives who had been taken away in the slave trade. And I think maybe 2 people raised their hands. Later on, Professor Opoku explained to me that a lot of Africans really don't want to relate to that part of their history, because what we have is a tree that has many branches, and if you are satisfied with just the trunk, well, there you got the continent, and that's it. But if you relate to the various diasporas, I'm talking about the diaspora that took us to North America, to South America, to Central America, to all of the islands here and wherever, then you would have to know something about what happened to Auntie so-and-so, who was abducted in 1849. I was also kind of taken by the fact that I ran into people who could give you the family history of the English royal house from whenever all the way up to the present day people, and at the same time couldn't talk very much about what happened to their relatives. I don't care how far removed we are, we're still from the same tree. And I think it'd be helpful for many Africans to pay some attention to where the fruits from those trees fell. And on that note, I'll stop preaching. Good evening.
Fair enough. And thank you for your story of Shackles Across Time. Was it real?
Was it?
Ha ha. I should.
Read the book and find out.
You got it, kid.